record this webinar. I just clicked record. So if you have any questions about it at a later time, or if you want to get a copy of the recording with the slides, we'll be happy to send them to you. I will also send it to you later tonight, but if you don't get it in the next few days, feel free to just email us and I'll be happy to send one to you then. And with that, we can go ahead and get started. So tonight we're going to talk about cultivating individual donors, and then once you've cultivated them, engaging them, and then from there keeping them. And then when you are actually going out there to talk to them, we're going to talk about the different ways that you can do that, including writing individual appeal letters and crowdfunding. We are not going to talk about the Fractured Atlas application or any of our orientation. And we're not going to talk about grants tonight. This is more geared toward individual donors. So if you have any questions about those, we do have other webinars that cover those topics, and you're welcome to ask questions about them by email or give us a call. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, I just wanted to share this chart with you. This is the breakdown of nonprofit arts organizations' revenue in the United States. This is a study that was conducted in 2004 by the National Endowment for the Arts. And it's a very informative chart telling us how most nonprofits get most of their money. As you can see, more than half of it comes from contributed revenue, but really the biggest portion of it is earned income. And your earned income is going to be ticket sales, merchandise sales, fee for service, those sorts of things where you are giving your vendor something and receiving funds in exchange. Contributed income, on the other hand, includes donations, it includes grants, it includes federal funding, other sort of governmental funding, and corporate sponsorship, those sorts of things. As you can see, individuals makes up the largest part of that pie in terms of the contributed income. So that's why we are going to focus on individuals, because we really feel, and this chart backs it up, that individuals are going to be the easiest and most accessible way for you to get funding that you need for your project. But first, it's nice to meet you. This is our Fractured Atlas staff, and most of the fiscal sponsorship team is up in the top row there, so you'll probably speak with Diane, Juliana, myself, Nathan, or Amanda at some point during your fiscal sponsorship or your time with us. Just for a little bit of background, Fractured Atlas is a nonprofit art organization that serves artists and arts organizations nationally. Our mission is to give the tools and resources artists need to be successful as businesses. We are a membership-based organization, so if you're not fiscally sponsored at this point, in order to become fiscally sponsored, we'll need for you to become a member first at either the individual level or the organization level. And the difference is that at the organization level, you are allowed one authorized user, one contact person for the membership, and that's $9.50 a month, or versus the organizational level, which allows up to 3 authorized users or contacts, and that's $19.50 a month. Before we get into more of the nitty-gritty, I want to go over a few of our other programs in case you're unaware of them. First, we have an insurance program, which is it's mostly business insurance. So you're going to find a lot of discipline-specific policies in terms of liability, equipment. We have directors and officers insurance. There are a lot of different kinds of policies that you need for your business. We do have practicing artists on staff as insurance brokers, and most of this can be managed online, much like your fiscal sponsorship, using some simple online tools. You can submit your application online. You can find information about the different policies online. So it's very accessible there for you. We also have a tech program called Artfully, which is web-based software that makes selling tickets, taking donations, and tracking fans easy and affordable. And we will talk a little bit about this later on, because you can actually use this in order to keep track of your donors and your correspondences with them. So we'll talk, like I said, a little bit about this later. And then this is our Performing Arts Spaces program, which is an online marketplace that you can use to find spaces based on a certain amount of search criteria. You know, how much you want to spend, where you are, the type of the discipline that you're looking for. You know, you can even specify if you need a specific kind of floor for dance and that sort of thing. We're live in a number of cities, including Atlanta, Austin, Chicago, DC, LA, Minnesota, New York, Bay Area, you know, all of these places that we're live, and you can find that information online as well. So before I get started, I also want to introduce myself briefly. Again, my name is Teresa. I'm the program associate for fiscal sponsorship at Fractured Atlas. I have a background in classical voice, and my degree is in voice performance, in fact. I moved to New York after I graduated from college and have been pursuing arts administration ever since. And I've sort of tried to stay active in my scene by participating in choirs around the city. So you might, if you are in the practice of going to some choral concerts, you might see me in there if you're in the New York area. Anyway, let's move on. So cultivating individual donors. This is one of the things that is most important to keep in mind, is that you're not just asking for money. You're inviting your donor to become part of something great, this movement that you're putting together. You do need money, obviously, to make it happen, but ultimately you're trying to make something happen, and that's what you're going to focus on. You're going to focus on your ultimate goal, your product, or your art, or whatever it is that you are creating, or whatever endeavor you're setting out to pursue. That is the goal. And of course, you do need funds to do that, but we're going to talk about how you can focus on that goal and communicate that to your donors. It's about vision and impact. You want to make sure that your donors are aware of your end product and that they can see what you see and what impact you hope to make on a certain audience. You want to tell a compelling story, including your background, the reason you're doing this. You want to make sure that you're engaging your donors' interest in such a way, and their humanity in such a way, that they can't help but want to be a part of your movement. And like it says, you're expanding a movement, which means that you are putting together this sort of a wave of impact for an audience, and you're inviting your donors to become part of that, and therefore you're expanding your movement. So here are some questions to ask yourself while you're getting ready. What's the compelling need or situation or problem that your project addresses? You're always going to want to identify a need or some sort of problem so that your donors know why you're doing this. You know, maybe there's a lack of this kind of art in your area, or maybe you are helping underprivileged children or something like that. You know, you have to be able to identify your problem so that you can later on identify the solution. So who's affected by this problem or impacted by this situation? You want to be able to identify your audience. That way your donors know that they're not just helping you create your art, they are helping this audience who is going to be impacted by your art as well. And so, sorry, I noticed that somebody was having some sound issues, and that's why I got distracted. So how is your project going to present an innovative solution? You might be the third theater company on your block, and you want to make sure that you are able to present your solution in such a way that's different from the other theater companies on your block. So it's important to keep in mind what makes you different and be able to articulate that. So what do you bring to the solution? And this does mean personally. You want to make sure that you are able to talk about why you're doing this and what makes you the right person to do it. Then what are your program strategies? This again can address what you're doing that's different than other people. And we'll talk more about all of these as we go on. I forgot to mention that if you can't hear me at any point, please do let me know in the question box, because otherwise I'll have no idea and I'll just keep on talking. So I'll try to address it at the time if I see that anybody is having a hard time. So you've asked yourself all of these questions and you've come up with answers to them. You want to make sure to highlight your solution. You've identified your problem. Now you need to identify your solution and sort of back it up so that your donors know why your solution is the correct one. You want to address how your approach is unique or different from other people in the area or discipline. That's exactly what I was saying about, if you're the third theater company on your block, why is your approach unique, and what are you doing that's different than everybody else? That's sort of, donors can be engaged by innovation, and so you want to make sure that you are identifying and communicating how you are being innovative to address the problem that you've set forth. What will be different for the audience as a result? If you are, to use that example of the third theater company on the block, you might have a similar, sound is going in and out. I want to make sure that I'm addressing that. Can you guys hear me? Is it sort of going in and out? Okay, it looks like it's better now. I'm holding the microphone a little bit closer to my mouth, so hopefully it won't go out as easily. Perfect. So so let's see, we're on bullet point number 3. What will be different for the audience? If you have the same audience as somebody else, you want to identify how. Okay, maybe not so close. All right, good feedback. Thank you, guys. You want to identify not only how your approach is different, but how it's going to be different for the audience that you're serving, especially if several other companies that are like yours are serving the same audience. You want to, again, bring forth that innovation and let your donors know why yours is different and how it will impact the audience differently. And then how will your donors' lives change? You want to not only express that you're helping these other people, but it's important for your donors to know that they are involved with this as well. So you want to identify how their lives will be affected by this too. So engaging your donors. Identify your goals. You want to develop an image of what success looks like and determine how you'll measure your progress. If you have your goals at the forefront of your entire fundraising campaign, then that'll drive it. It'll really make everything else sort of fall into play because it'll make sense to you. So if your goal is helping one audience or putting together one performance or one exhibition or something like that, then having that goal in mind and communicating that goal is what's going to drive your entire campaign. You want to evaluate your communication and voice. Not everybody communicates in the same way. And this is actually one of the things that Artfully is really helpful with, because you want to sort of take a step back after you first approached your donors to see what was effective. And if writing somebody a letter was not effective, but a phone call might be, then maybe you should give them a phone call and see if that has a greater impact. And if it does, then you know that you need to be calling that donor forever. And, sometimes, especially when social media comes into play, your voice changes depending on if you're sending an email or if you're sending a letter or if you're on social media of some sort. And you want to make sure that you're using the appropriate voice and the appropriate mode of communication for your specific audience. You might have somebody, if you're trying to reach maybe an older generation, then they may not be as tech savvy. I know I'm generalizing right now, but maybe a phone call and that face-to-face is something that's more important to them, and they're not interested in hashtags and all of that stuff. But if you're trying to reach a very young generation and you know that Twitter and hashtags are the way to go about doing that, then you're going to want to do that. You should implement the sort of tendencies that you find with each of your donors, and treat each one of them differently, because no two people communicate in the same way. Communicate your goals. So not only do you have to identify them, but you also need to communicate them to your donors. You want to keep your objective front and center in your communications so that your audience knows what you're trying to accomplish and how they can play a role in that accomplishment. And then you should reward your supporters for your success. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to send them a box of chocolates every time you have some sort of a success, but it is important for you to reward them if it's just a thank you. Maybe it's a thank you on social media or on your website, or maybe it's a t-shirt that you want to send them in exchange for a donation or something like that. But again, it doesn't even have to be tangible. You can be creative. And the reward that you give them and the sort of value of that reward should correlate with the amount that they donate. If you have somebody that donates $20, then they should not get the same sort of reward that somebody who donates $5,000 will get. You want to make sure that what you're giving them really corresponds with the amount that they're donating. And like I said, be creative. You can invite them to rehearsals, or invite them to a reading, or invite them to your opening exhibition, something like that, where you can get them engaged, and it doesn't necessarily have a monetary value, but it has an emotional value that'll stay with them. You want to guide your donors through the process. And this is really, really important, because you don't want to put the ask out there and then all of a sudden they don't know what to do with that. You want to make sure that if you're writing a letter, you're giving instructions for how to donate. If you're putting instructions on your website, it should be front and center. Your donors, I think I saw that they shouldn't have to scroll down more than once or twice to find the information that they need. So you should really have either, the same thing goes for clicks, not only scrolling once or twice, but clicking once or twice. You should have a donate button right on your homepage so that it's front and center for them. And then if you have instructions for how to donate by check, for example, then that should be easily accessible as well. It should be right there, because it would really be a shame if you got somebody on board and then all of a sudden they didn't know how to donate, so they couldn't do anything with their excitement. Make sure to refine your messaging. It's not about asking for a donation necessarily. You're inviting them to be part of your movement. Along the same lines, you don't necessarily want to ask for support, quote unquote, because support could mean anything. You want to definitely make sure that your messaging, while you are inviting them to be part of your movement, you are ultimately also asking for a donation. So you want to make sure that you say that outright. And support, like I said, can come in a lot of forms. So they could support you just by volunteering, which is helpful. But ultimately, if you're trying to get them to make a donation, you need to say that you're asking for a donation. So there's no sort of fuzziness or no miscommunication. Use interactive tools. Like I said, it may not work for everybody, but the internet is so huge these days that you really need to use those to your advantage. Basically, when the first thing somebody does when they hear of a new company or of a new initiative or a new anything really is they'll go to Google or Bing or whatever search engine they use, and they'll search for your company essentially. And if you're not the first one there, then that could be potentially hurtful for you. So you want to make sure that you have a broad online presence, and that should mean you should definitely have a website that's up to date. You'll have your Fractured Atlas online profile if you are fiscally sponsored, and that'll definitely be up there. You want to make sure that you have a Facebook presence and probably a Twitter presence, or some sort of variation of or some sort of you want to use as much social media as you can that makes sense for your project. It may not make sense for you to have a Pinterest page, or it may not make sense for you to have Flickr, but maybe it makes sense for you to have a few of those other things. You just want to make sure that you are Googleable, which I know is such a strange word, but it's definitely something that you want because people are using the internet to find information so much. And then the last one, I know, let's see, I have a clarification here. What do you mean our Fractured Atlas presence? There's what do I mean our Fractured Atlas presence? Use the Fractured Atlas logo for a button to donate. Yes, you should have information about Fractured Atlas on your website when you're asking for donations. But really, I mean, there's an online profile. Each project that is fiscally sponsored has a unique donation page, which also has a profile on it. And that does come up when you search for the project name or the fiscal sponsorship name on Google, because we have Google search functionality. So that's actually something that'll come up when somebody searches for that. I hope that clarifies everything. And the last one says, remember the real goal and share it with your donors. Again, you should share your goal. I know I'm sort of beating you over the head with this, but share your real goal, and it's not about necessarily asking for money every single or outright. It's about inviting them to be part of this and to meet an ultimate goal, and you're asking for them for money along the way. So this is another clarification to the question that I just answered. So we link to the donation page linked from a donate button. Yes, the donate button that you put on your website will link to your donation page /online profile. And that will take you, once you click the donate button, it'll take you to this page where your donors will be able to read a little bit about your project and then donate. Now, if you are using Artfully, then there is the possibility to embed a donation widget right on your website. And that's something that will be, Fractured Atlas will still charge the donation, but they won't be taken to your online profile or to your donation page, your unique donation page, that and they'll be able to just make the donation through your website. And somebody's asking about Indiegogo, and I just want to point out that I'm not ignoring this question, but we'll talk about this later on because we're going to talk a little bit about crowdfunding. And one point I wanted to make when we're back to evaluating your communication and voice is, with Artfully, you can take note of each of your communications with your donors or with your supporters, your audience members, anyone really, and you can sort of make note of what works and what does not work. If like we were talking about, a phone call works for one person but doesn't work for somebody else, then you can make that note on Artfully and keep track of that, so that if somebody else goes later on to make a phone call to the person that doesn't like to be talked to on the phone, then they'll know, oh, maybe an email is better, or maybe a letter is better, and sort of keep track of that sort of communication. And that's another thing that we mean about evaluating it. How can you change it each time, and how can you keep track of it? Is it better to use the donate button or to use Artfully? That's really a personal preference, because Artfully will not take you away. If you do the Artfully widget, it won't take you away from your website. So if you want that for branding purposes, then that makes sense. However, we do see that there might be more confusion with your donors about who's charging their credit card, because it'll still be Fractured Atlas, but they never leave your website. So it might be clearer to them if they go to your online profile. It's really, you sort of have to weigh your options about what you want in terms of branding and what your donors want in terms of communication about who's going to be charging the credit card and all of that information. Keeping your donors. Develop, this is now that we've cultivated our donors and we've sort of approached them, we need to figure out how to keep them. And here are some methods that you can use. You can develop an advisory committee that helps you stay connected. And these people, if volunteer base is great, can help you write thank you notes. They can help you give them calls. They can help you write your new appeals, that sort of thing. They can help you just do mailings, at the very least, because mailings can be time consuming. So If you want to send a brochure, if you want to send them an update, that sort of thing, then this advisory committee or even volunteer committee could really be helpful for that. You want to make sure to write a personalized thank you to each donor immediately upon receiving their gift. And this is huge. Your donors want to feel like they are personally helping. You want to speak to their humanity about this donation. You want to personally thank them instead of sending some sort of blanket letter. You want to talk about how their specific donor or their specific donation helped you. What did you spend those funds on? How was it impactful for a specific audience? Did it allow you to do something that you weren't planning on being able to do? That sort of thing. They want to know that you are personally engaged with their specific donation, and that'll keep them engaged, and hopefully it'll keep them interested in donating again in the future because they feel like they did make a huge impact. Keep them up to date on your activities and invite them. That's huge. They want to see the product of their donation. So absolutely invite them to all of your events. It may not be any sort of formal exposition of your work or anything, but maybe you have a fundraising event, or maybe you are even going to attend something for research and your donors, and you have a high ticket donor. Maybe you want to invite them to get their perspective on that sort of thing. Again, it's important to let them know how you use their gift so that they can see sort of tangibly how they helped. And keeping them up to date on your activities is huge, because they want to know what's going on. They want to know what they're engaging in and how they impacted everything. And if you keep them up to date, then hopefully they will stay engaged and continue to donate down the road. Use their preferred method of correspondence, like we talked about before. Don't call them if they prefer a letter. Don't email them if they prefer to be called, that sort of thing. And survey your donors, especially at the beginning when you're mostly approaching your family and friends. You should ask them what they think of your communications, and if they have feedback, absolutely implement it. It could be very helpful, because you don't want to keep on using communication styles that don't necessarily work. You want to make sure that you're revising them as you go so that you can stay fresh and make sure that everything is effective. Everything that you're doing is effective. So why do people give, and how can you get them to give? Some people do, in fact, want status. You hear about some philanthropers who are just famous because they give money. They support various artistic or various technological endeavors or whatever, but they associate this status with the philanthropy. And so maybe that's one reason your donors want to give. You want to make sure that you have printed materials and opportunities ready to give them in case they want more information after that first approach. They should always be up to date, especially your website should be up to date, but make sure that your printed materials, your brochures, any sort of flyers that you're using are up to date, because you don't really want to give them something that's out of date, that has inaccurate information or outdated information. Instead of asking for money, ask for help in time or advice. Some people might be really well-versed in law, or maybe they are an accountant on the side, or have some sort of hobby that could help you. You want to make sure that if they can't give money, that you are asking them for help instead. Asking them for volunteer time or something like that. You might be able to work something out of the relationship other than just money. You want to turn no's into not yets. If they say no right now, then that's absolutely fine. Not everybody can give right now, but maybe later on down the road, with a little bit of more engaging and maybe keeping them up to date on your activities, they'll want to give later on when they're able to. Keep track of your contact with them. Like we said, Artfully is a really great way to do that, so that you can keep track of when you emailed them or when you contacted them, how you contacted them, whether it was effective, and that sort of thing. And if they can't give dollars, they might be able to give time or advice, but they also might just be able to put you in touch with somebody else who does typically support your kind of work and might be able to donate. Maybe they know somebody else who has donated, who is looking for something to donate to, especially if it's at the end of the year, and hopefully they can put you in touch with that person, and with that person's endorsement will help you engage this new donor a little bit easier and get a donation out of them. The other thing that you can ask for is non-cash donations. If you have a budget item that is maybe space, then, and this person has a connection to a venue, then maybe you ask them for some sort of connection with that venue, or maybe they can arrange some sort of pro bono service or free rent or something like that. So you're not necessarily limited to money. And the thing is that you can knock out some of those budget items with a donation of that actual item instead of money to pay for that item. So you want to make sure that when you are communicating with your donors that you don't lack enthusiasm. You want to make sure that they are confident in your ability to carry out this work and your passion for the work. So you want to stay confident, have the right attitude. It's not about, I need this or this won't happen. It's about really playing up the goal that you have in mind and how your donor can help you execute that goal. You're not asking for a handout. You're asking for them to become engaged and to obviously give you money if they can, but also to help you get the word out and to become part of your expanding movement. And again, don't forget to convey confidence. You want to make sure that they feel confident that you can make this art happen. So the most traditional way to approach donors and to ask for money is to write an individual appeal letter. And that can be in a typewritten letter, it can be a handwritten letter, it can be an email. There's so many ways to do this now that are effective. But ultimately the same structure applies, and the same, well, you'll get an idea. You can use these tips for any type of appeal letter, whether it's online or by paper. You want to make sure to use simple, straightforward language. You don't want to use flowery language. It's not about how great or how eccentric something is. It's about what you're doing. You want to use nouns and verbs. You don't want to use as many adverbs or adjectives. They want to know what you're doing, not necessarily how great it is that you're doing it. You want to format your letter so it's easy to read. Make sure that you're using a very readable font. You want to make sure that you are writing a writable font both in size and the actual font itself. You want to use paragraphs. You want to make sure that it's not more than a page or two long, because you want to keep them engaged in your letter. It shouldn't drag on so that they lose their attention, or so that you lose their attention before they get to the second page. So it's really important to keep it short and sweet. You're asking for money, not support, like we said before. You want to make sure that it's clear that you're asking for a donation. And you want to give them a reason to send money now. There is a reason that you're asking for money now and not 3 months ago or 6 months down the line. You want to make sure that that's communicated to them. You should give them a deadline. I'm trying to raise X amount of dollars by this date. And that's important for them to know, because otherwise they could just send you money 6 months down the line. And while that's helpful, it's not really helpful to you right now, which is when you're actually asking for the funds and when you actually need it. So it's good to keep it imminent. So keep that in mind. You want to use I and you, but mostly you. Remember, we're talking about how your donor is going to benefit from this, as well as how you are going to make it happen. So these are the pronouns that you're going to be using most frequently. You want to base the appeal on benefits and not needs. And I was sort of getting to this on the last slide when we were talking about conveying confidence. It's not about what you need to make this happen. It's not about, while you do need funds to make it happen, you want to make sure that you are communicating the benefit to the donor, the benefit to your audience, and even, in some cases, the benefit to yourself. But, mostly it's going to be about the audience and the donor so that they feel like they're helping somebody else and so that they know what they can get out of it. Use online resources to search for examples. There are definitely some amazing appeal letters online, and you can Google search them. It's really easy. And there's some really good, those are some good examples to use sort of as a base. We also have an individual appeal letter on our website on your My Fiscal Sponsorship page under the fundraising templates section. That one is definitely just a skeleton. It's not the end-all be-all of appeal letters, but it's a good start. It'll give you an idea of the types of things that you should talk about in your appeal letters and how it should be structured. So somebody asked for appeal letters and formatting of them. What is my opinion on including images in the letter? I would keep the images minimal. I think it's always nice to include some sort of image so that they can see what they are donating for. Maybe include an image, maybe one, maybe two, but the thing is that the image shouldn't take away from the text, because ultimately you want them to read the text and not focus so much on the photos. So it is a good idea to include maybe one, but not so many that they're distracted from the actual text that you want them to read. So now we're going to move on to crowdfunding. So what is crowdfunding? It's an online community that you're going to use to solicit pledges. It uses the word of mouth and wisdom of the crowd to generate interest in a project, and you're definitely engaging your donors in a very transparent way, because it'll show the donations that have been made so far, who's made them, how much has been raised, that sort of thing, so that other people can sort of see who else has been engaged in this project and maybe engage themselves because they see somebody that they know, or because they see how many donors you have, that sort of thing. The idea is that you're going to use a lot of social media in a lot of cases to promote this campaign. And hopefully what happens, the ideal situation is that you send out your initial appeal or your initial push for marketing for this campaign, and then everybody, let's say you're using Facebook for this, everybody in your Facebook feed sees it, and then they donate, and then they click share because they've donated and they want to let people know about that. And that way everyone in their news feeds sees that they shared this because they just donated, and they're like, oh, I want to get on. Looks like somebody lost audio. Did anybody else lose audio? Can everybody hear me? No, fine, still got you. Okay, good. Might be something on your actual computer instead of me, because I can't see anything that's wrong on our end. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your help. So hopefully they'll get on that bandwagon because they see that other people that they know have been donating, and it's really a great way to market to a much larger crowd than you can with your individual letter writing campaign or something like that. Oh, great. The audio is back. Perfect. Thank you. It's also free marketing. If your donors are doing half of the marketing for you, then that's awesome. That's more than you can ask for, because they ultimately donated, but if they're also promoting your campaign, then that's great, because they really want to see that this project happens, and that'll hopefully inspire them to encourage other people to donate as well. So we have a few partnerships, a few crowdfunding partnerships. One of them is Indiegogo. And as you you'll see with a few of the images that I show you, they're basically all the same. If you're using Indiegogo or Kickstarter or RocketHub, there are a lot of very similar things about their actual structure. You're always going to see something media like, whether it's a video or a photo. You're always going to see a goal and how much of that goal you've raised. You're always going to see a timeline. And if anyone is set up giving levels, or Indiegogo calls them perks, then you'll always see the perks. Just a tip, there's a statistic that says something like only 30% of campaigns that use only a photo are funded. So it's really a good idea. It really behooves you to use a video with your campaign instead of a photo, because that engages people a little bit more and gives them a more of a heart-to-heart with you, because in that video you'll be asking for funds directly and sort of showing them what it means to you and what it means to the other people who are engaging in your project or who are participating in your project. This is what RocketHub looks like. Again, you see the media, you see the goal, you see how much was raised toward the goal, you see how much time is left. Of course, in both of these cases, the campaign had ended, but you also see the goods or giving levels below. There are some subtle differences between the different campaigns. Obviously they all have different branding. And in Kickstarter's case, for example, they have an all or nothing model where you have to reach your goal in order to get any of the funds that were pledged, and your backers will have their credit card charged at the end of the campaign if you reach your goal. Otherwise, they won't be charged at all. With RocketHub, on an everyday basis, they're flexible funding model, so you're going to get all the funds that are raised or that are pledged towards your goal. Indiegogo does both. So you sort of have a choice there if you go without Fractured Atlas. The thing about the Fractured Atlas campaign, as long as we're talking about the all or nothing model, is that if it's connected to your fiscal sponsorship, then it's going to be flexible funding regardless, because Fractured Atlas is actually going to be charging the credit cards. So anytime your donor puts information into your Indiegogo or RocketHub campaign, Fractured Atlas is going to charge the credit card. They're going to get a tax receipt, and their credit card statement will say Fractured Atlas on it. That does confuse a lot of people. We get some chargebacks because people are not aware that Fractured Atlas is going to be charging the credit card, but ultimately that's how it goes. It does only accept credit card contributions. So while Fractured Atlas does accept both credit card and check donations, for the Indiegogo and RocketHub campaigns, we only accept credit cards. That is both a function of their websites. They only accept credit card contributions, and also the fact that the way our partnership works, the way we've integrated our websites, and the way it's been integrated is that Indiegogo and RocketHub send us information about the actual donations, but we cannot send them information back. So we'll get information about your donors from them. Can't work vice versa. There are no double fees. You will only be charged the Fractured Atlas 7% administrative fee, and you will not have to worry about 4% if you do reach your goal, or 9% if you don't on Indiegogo's website, and then RocketHub is, I think, 4% and 8%. You will only be charged 7%. And you can actually opt into Indiegogo or RocketHub right on your My Fiscal Sponsorship page under the Accessorize heading. We do have a question here about this. Do we have a partnership with Kickstarter? Unfortunately, we don't. There are a few reasons for this. Part of it has to do with how we actually do integrate our websites, and it just wouldn't work out. We've approached them about it. It wasn't our two models are too different, so it wasn't going to work out. But we do have a Kickstarter curated page, so you can you can go to our curated page, and it'll show any campaign that's affiliated with Fractured Atlas. They can be fiscally sponsored projects, they can buy insurance through us, they can just be community members. Anyone really that's affiliated with Fractured Atlas can be listed on our curated page. We have no problem with that. So somebody's asking where you can find the opt-in information for Indiegogo or RocketHub. It'll be on your My Fiscal Sponsorship page under the Accessorize heading. And when you click on Accessorize, there'll be a few options. Artfully is also in there, and you can select Indiegogo or RocketHub, and then there'll be, you can walk through the prompts. So, okay, so this is a good question. So you and Indiegogo share the revenue. We don't share the revenue per se. Fractured Atlas pays them a fee. It's actually part of our marketing budget. We pay them a flat fee for the services that they are offering our projects, because they do ultimately offer them for free to our projects. So we do pay them a fee for service. Are we charged the 7% for every donation? Yes, generally speaking. Every credit card donation will be charged a 7% administrative fee, and that includes all credit card processing fees that we incur from the credit card company. Now, for check donations and any grants that come in by check, we have a tiered structure that starts at 7%, and then once you raise $150,000, that'll drop to 6%, and then $500,000 it'll drop to 5%, 5%, and so on. So that information is on our website. You can find that there. So this is your Fractured Atlas page, your unique URL where you'll find your online profile, which is actually below the photo there. There'll be information about your project that you can customize. An image, you can put a YouTube video or an image there. And then if you see across the top that there are some tabs, one of them being giving levels. Similarly to a campaign, you can create giving levels on our website where that could be partially deductible, or you can just say how the gift will help your project, what kind of budget item that you're going to use it for, or you can offer them a gift and include a value. But that you can find under the Giving Levels tab, and you see that it says Donate Now. The other option is if your donors click this big old Donate Now button on the right-hand side of the screen, it'll take you to this. A pop-up will appear where your donors can indicate the amount that they donate, how often they want to donate, and if they want to cover the 7% administrative fee. And then later on in the process, they'll click to the next step, and later on in the process, they'll be able to select a giving level if you have them set up, and they'll enter their credit card information. So here are some additional resources for you. Fractured U is our online courses. There are courses in basically anything business. There's marketing, there's fundraising, all sorts of things. So, and you only have to be a community member to access that. So anyone who is at a paid level can also access it. Indiegogo, RocketHub, Kickstarter, Foundation Center has a lot of really interesting seminars, both online and in person, about fundraising that you can use. And then this last one is a Forbes article about crowdfunding and sort of its growth over the last 5 years or so. And we invite you to take all the webinars in our series. There's the Introduction to Fiscal Sponsorship, Orientation, Individual Donors and Online Campaigns, which is what we did tonight. And then Proposals and Grants will be next week. We offer all 4 of these every month, except for December, and then over the summer. We take breaks during those months. But you're welcome to join any and all of them. And you often offer special webinars about, maybe in the past, we've done liability insurance for fiscally sponsored projects. We've done collecting data and how to use data for fiscally sponsored projects. We've done government grants, corporate grants, those sorts of things. And so you can keep an eye out for those, and they'll all be listed on our website on the fiscal sponsorship information page. Then if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at support@fracturedatlas.org. We are online based, so we handle most of our requests and most of our workload through email, and so we encourage you to contact us that way. But we are also available by phone at any time. And at this point, we're pretty much finished up, I'll go through, we have a queue of questions here, so I'll go ahead and start answering those. If you have to go, feel free. You can skip out anytime. I thank everybody for attending, and I'll go ahead and start with the questions now. If your projects are ongoing, should you do an appeal for each or for the company as a whole? It's always a good idea to have something specific to include in an appeal. So, especially if you're doing a crowdfunding campaign, you should not do a crowdfunding campaign for your general operating expenses or for your ongoing activities. You'll want to have a specific campaign, either crowdfunding or any sort of fundraising campaign about one particular event or goal or something like that. It's easier to communicate what your specific goal is rather than your ongoing activities. You're welcome to have, I mean, especially on Fractured Atlas, you're going to have a donate button at all times, but your specific pushes should be for something specific that's coming up. Why would we want our own website for our project rather than using our page on Fractured Atlas? Because your own website can have more information on it. Ultimately, you want to, and it'll have your own branding. You don't want your project necessarily to be only associated with Fractured Atlas's branding, because then it sort of becomes one thing, and ultimately Fractured Atlas isn't going to be your only, like that pie chart at the beginning, we were talking about all the different sources of income. Since Fractured Atlas can only help with one of those types of income, you want to make sure that you have a presence online to get more information out there. Plus, Fractured Atlas has to approve all of the changes that you make to, like a Fractured Atlas staff person has to approve all of the changes that you make to your profile. So it's actually kind of a better idea to keep that general about your activities and then keep your website up to date. And that'll be the same for Facebook and Twitter and whatever else you use. It'll just be a way for you to get more up-to-date information out to your donors and to your audience. You can use it to sell tickets if you have any sort of event that's coming up. You can, or just not even sell tickets. If you have any sort of event coming up, that's how you can publicize it and that sort of thing. We are mapping out a three-tier approach. 1, crowdfunding, 2, individual appeal letters for general donations, giving levels, and 3, targeted individual appeals for larger sums for very specific aspects of the project. I was thinking that those 3 groups shouldn't have crossed over. Here's the thing. If you use crowdfunding, I like your approach. I like that you're keeping it separate. And I think that's a really great idea, to sort of, so that you can focus your energy on one thing. I think that's going to be the best use of your time and the best use of your energy and the best use of your resources, to sort of focus only on one thing at a time. However, if you did need to cross over, you can do that effectively if you have different audiences. If you're using your crowdfunding campaign for one endeavor, and then you're also you have a letter writing campaign, but it's for something totally separate. If you have 2 different audiences, you can do them at the same time. You just want to avoid overloading your donors or sort of bombarding them with information about all of your activities. And that would be the drawback to doing it all at once. So I like your idea of doing these different things at different times, and that ultimately will probably be really good for you, because you can put more energy into it and sort of hopefully do it better. Will Fracture Atlas email reminders about upcoming webinars? We won't, but it does go out. Well, I guess yes and no. We don't email them anything specific about the specific webinars, but we do include the dates not only on our website but in our newsletter. So if you get the newsletter once a month, then and that's the fiscal sponsorship newsletter, not the Fractured Atlas Culture Flash newsletter. But if you get the fiscal sponsorship newsletter, then that'll include the dates of any upcoming webinars, as well as any in-person info sessions that we might be having. Is it true that all grant applications must be vetted first by Fractured Atlas? If Fractured Atlas needs to be involved, and if there's a requirement that a 501c3 receive the award, then yes, every grant application must be vetted first by Fractured Atlas. Ultimately, if you're using our name or if you're using our EIN, we want to know about it, and that's why we need to take a look at them and approve them first. Plus, you can sort of use that to your own advantage because we do look at a ton of these. So we're happy to bounce ideas, to be there for you to bounce ideas off of. And we're also there to give you feedback. We definitely take a look at them so that we can help you make the best proposal that you can. Why is the org called Fractured Atlas? That's a kind of that goes back to 1998 when our executive director, Adam, was very into Elvis Costello and was looking for a name for his company. At the time, it was a theater company. And he heard Poor Fractured Atlas, or he saw something about Poor Fractured Atlas, the Elvis Costello song, and ultimately that is how we got our name. To create a sense of why donate now, should we have monthly goals or goals for a specific fundraiser drive? I think if you can create marketing around monthly goals, that's great, and you can use that. But I think that'll burn you and your donors out kind of quickly. So I think doing a specific fundraiser drive, maybe a few months long, is going to be a better use of your time and energy, just so that you don't burn out your donors and you don't burn yourself out, because ultimately fundraising is huge. It takes a lot of time. And so if you're just starting over every month, then it might wear you out. That being said, having a monthly and an internal monthly goal is not a bad idea. That way you guys can sort of track your progress and see how you need to change things, evaluate your approach, that sort of thing as you go along. Is there an advantage to partnering with both Indiegogo and RocketHub, or is it better to go with one or the other? I think that you should not run both at the same time. However, there's no harm in doing one of each at different times to see which one you like better and which one speaks better with your donors. I think it's absolutely appropriate for you to try them both out, or even just to look at both of them to see which branding you like better and which one you think has easier usability. If it's easier for your donors to use, if it's easier for you to use, then hopefully it'll be easier for your donors to use. So those are the types of things that I would look at. I just wouldn't run a campaign on both at the same time, because that'll confuse your donors. They may not know which one to donate to, especially if you're fundraising for the same thing in both. Can we get this program in a PDF? Yes, I am recording this, and so you will get a copy of the slides as well as a copy of the recording probably tomorrow. I imagine I'll be able to upload it to YouTube by tomorrow and get that out to you. I'm considering crowdfunding. If I can't get a video made, can a compelling story be made with photos? I think absolutely. I think you can, as long as it's just not a still photo that's there, because that does lose your donor's interest. However, if you have a still photo and then several photos throughout the body of the campaign, that engages more interest. Or if you put together some sort of slideshow that creates a story, I think you can do that. I think there are creative ways to make images and make photos the story. And I think, especially if you are a photographer, that's going to be a great way to sort of show them your craft. If we can secure funding for a project through Fractured Atlas, what are the restrictions on distribution or any profits the project brings in? We would like for you to operate sort of charitably and nonprofit per se. The idea is that basically all funds that you raise, whether it's through donations or through sales or anything, should be put back into your project or back into your company. No one person should be privately benefiting from the funds. And therefore, that basically means that you or one of your donors or one of your coworkers or whatever shouldn't just be pocketing this money to go out and use at your own discretion. It should be used for the company. Do you recommend having a second crowdsourcing campaign if we don't meet our initial goal? I think that it is a good idea to sort of revise, take a step back, look at why your campaign may not have worked, and do another one. Again, you don't want to do them too close together because you risk burnout for your donors, but I think having a second crowdsourcing campaign is not a bad idea. How long should a fundraising campaign last? We have a one-time project. Should we put a deadline on it? The best crowdfunding campaigns are 30 days long. Basically, they expect that you'll get something like 75 or 80% of how much you're going to raise in the first week, something similar, something like that. So it is not, you'll just start to see the donations trickle off. So there's no need to have it last longer than 30 days, thereabouts. But most crowdfunding websites will make you, they require that the campaign is 60 days or less. Should we let people know about our crowdsourcing campaigns and the individual donor letters? I think if you are doing, yes, because you want to get the word out there as many ways as possible. Crowdfunding, email, letters, that sort of thing. The issue with paper letters and crowdsourcing campaigns is that there's a disconnect between the website and how they can enter that in, because if they have to type in the website, it's more likely for them to mess it up. So you might want to keep your communication about your crowdfunding campaign limited to email and social media and newsletters and that sort of thing, so that you can link directly to the donation page. Okay, this is a very specific situation, and it might be helpful to everybody, but generally speaking, I want to encourage you to, and if it's something specific about your project, email us with your question. So this person was approached by a donor before they even found Fractured Atlas, so they've been talking about a donation for quite a while. Does this person still need to get future correspondence approved by FA before he actually donates? It really depends on how you're approaching this person at this point. I think because this is a specific situation, we should talk about it offline, or we should talk about it by email or phone. Generally speaking, if you are already talking to this person about a donation, then we probably don't need to review anything else, especially if it's just an informal conversation. But if you are giving them information about Fractured Atlas, then maybe we'll want to review it. I think it really depends on where you are in the situation and what information they're asking for and what information you're offering at this point. What happens, guys? Just so that we all know, there are 3 more questions, and I'm just going to go ahead and answer those, and then we'll be finished since it's after 8:30. What happens if we exceed our fundraising goal? What do we do with the extra money? This is sort of what I was saying before with having profits from sales or from fundraising or whatever. We would just ask that you put it back into the project. And I know you mentioned, I think it was you that mentioned that you have a one-time project. We would see if there's anybody that you didn't get to pay or didn't pay enough or something like that. Maybe you gave an intern a stipend of $50 and they actually deserve more. That sort of thing. We try to find ways for you to use the funds so that they are being put back into your project. Say something about campaign rewards, how to distribute them, and expenses involved. I think the expenses involved is something that you will want to factor into your goal. So if you need $5,000 for your project, but you are going to offer gifts that require postage or require fabrication or something like that, then you're going to want to include those expenses in the goal, or at least include them, sort of increase the donation amount for those items so that it covers the stuff that you need to purchase for these to make the rewards possible. You will distribute them however it makes sense to you, depending on what it is that you're offering. You know, there are some things that you can offer by email. There are some that you'll need mail correspondence for. And that's just something that when you're actually setting up the campaign, it'll walk you through that process. But Fractured Atlas isn't really engaged in that process because we don't distribute them. You will be. So that's something we can definitely talk about more if you want more suggestions. But that, generally speaking, those are most of my thoughts on that. Would Fractured Atlas handle in-kind donation as well if the donor wanted a tax receipt for the total cost of the donation, for instance, catering services? Yes, Fractured Atlas can process in-kind donations of tangible items. Things like rent and services are not considered tax deductible according to the IRS, so we can't accept those donations. In those, for donations of tangible items, whether it's equipment or food or drinks or something like that, we would just have your donors complete a non-cash donation form, which you can find on our website. And then they would need to assign a value to the items that they're donating, and we would process it at that value and take the 7% based on that value. So if you want more information, there's information in our program manual about it, and we're happy to answer it by email. So with that, I think we're all complete. We're all finished. I hope anybody who's on the East Coast tonight stays warm and stays with power and everything, and that you're not too snowed in. Anybody else, I hope you have a great night, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions. And that's it. So yeah, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for attending. I'll be sending an email probably tomorrow.